It's episode 47, and we have Brian Bohaty, former Transformational Officer and COO, to discuss everything Insurtech and COVID-19. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's episode 47 of the Fintech Moshpit. Many have said we wouldn't make it this long. I told them all we are definitely going to last at least 47 episodes. The question is, are we going to get to 48? That lies in the hands of our next guest, none other than an amazing executive, a former executive transformational officer and COO across so many different great companies that we know and love around here, Allstate, TIAA, Bank of America. Brian Bohaty, welcome to the show, my friend. I am very excited for this conversation with you.
Well, it's great to be here. I don't know if I should take my cup that says it's 5 o'clock somewhere and change the juice or not with all that pressure.
You have to, but the good news is this. It's basically Groundhog Day. Every single day it's like COVID, pandemic, stay-at-home day. So if we mess this up, we'll just start over again tomorrow. It's going to be exactly the same, right? I mean, it's got to be that way.
Easy.
Listen, let's jump right into it because you and I, we haven't actually known each other that long, but we were introduced through our mutual friends in the insurtech space in Charlotte. I don't know that everyone fully comprehends. We've spent a lot of time over the last several years making Charlotte understand and that it's known as a fintech hub, as a fintech destination, a powerhouse globally. And not a lot of people realize that this is actually also a pretty significant insurtech destination as well. And when you think about the companies, obviously you were with Allstate, but you've got AIG, you've got Aflac, you've got AXA, you've got Bright House. I mean, the list goes on, and there's so more even beyond than that. We are a significant player in insurance and insurtech. And for those who are tuning in are like, well, what is that, Tark? Well, just like fintech is the use of technology, either in a company or an initiative to disrupt or enhance the practices of financial services, banking, everything you think there, that definition basically is the same, but replace the word financial services with insurance services in the insurance market. So with that being said, Brian, kick us off because we're going to talk a bit about insurtech, that industry, but also broader fintech, but how things are changing, how things you're seeing are changing in the conversations you're having, and where do you think they're going? So let's just start at a high level. Any other clarity you might give our viewers of what this space is, but more particularly, what are these macro implications of COVID to this insurtech industry globally?
Well, I think you nailed it on all accounts, especially with the number of insurance companies actually moving operations to the Carolinas. And the list goes on beyond what you were talking about, candidly. And insurtech is very similar to fintech. As a matter of fact, I just would look at it as a tranche of fintech. And on the macro basis, it's about digitization. It's about making things easier. It's about disrupting old business models, all of which we're in the midst of right now. And so if we take a step back and we think about a more macro level, I think some of the things people are thinking about right now is, number one, are people okay? So we got to get past that. That's the number one priority. Number two is, will our systems actually work? A lot of firms are finding that their systems work in this new world, right? Number three is, all right, now that we've got that solved, how are we going to communicate with our customers differently, right? Because companies might be ready for more digitization, but our customers? So at a very high level, it is all about digitization, period.
So let's start at the 100 level, entry level, and work our way up to the master's level courses. For the basic person who we have just basically made them aware there's a topic called insurtech. And I think there's going to be a variety of people there, all the way to people who can, write dissertations on it. I think the easiest way to give them the next level of understanding is start with that last piece you said of the digitization of the virtualization enhancements that are going to happen at the customer experience level. Give a couple examples that might help people understand what that could look like and how it could impact them.
Well, let's use you as an example, right? As a homeowner, you've got insurance on your home, right? In case something bad happens. So if something were to happen tomorrow, you have a water leak or the tree hits the roof or something, typically what would happen is your insurance agent would send out an adjuster and they'd look at it real life and they'd walk around, they'd take photographs. Well, what if we had the capability, which actually exists with some companies today, to just log on to your iPad, flip the view around and actually show the adjuster virtually, hey, here's my damage. The adjuster looks at it. They've got some technology behind the scenes to kind of estimate it. And there's a check in your bank account, electronic payment within 24 hours. That's a real example of using technology in the insurance space to not just automate, but create a whole new customer experience, make it simple, make it more efficient, make it more scalable, and in the end, creates a different business model.
All right, so that's your 100 level course. I think anyone who's interacted in any way with insurance, whether it's a claim on your homeowner's insurance or an accident in your car or, whatever, right? I think they can picture that. So if you go up to 200 level courses, I think that the question people might then be asking logically to move to is, all right, well, these things have kind of existed. I mean, it's not like the technology's not there. Is it that, there have been players slow to adopt or reasons why, and now COVID and post-COVID, all of a sudden, much like we're seeing in fintech and banking and in other industries, all of a sudden there's a critical mass and a requirement that's going to jolt people in this direction?
I think it's always been there. And there are companies, big insurance companies that have invested in the space and invested in insurtech in small pockets. But there's also companies out there that are thinking about whole new business models. You're talking about car insurance. And while car insurance, the way I'm going to describe it, isn't available in North Carolina, it is available in other states to pay by the mile. And so people are thinking about ways to disrupt the model. And so while some companies have invested in the space, there could be internal politics, there could be internal investment, there could be internal prioritization, which you move at a steady pace, but sometimes slow, sometimes fast to adopt it. And that's where I think the opportunity comes in with very creative, very forward-thinking business model changes or leveraging technology, because some companies don't have the time to spend, if you will, on all those great ideas. And so going up a level, to your point, it's more of, there's investment prioritization, there's focus, there's business models that people don't want to change. And so I think that's how I would describe your 200 level.
All right. Now, you know where we got to go next, and that's the 300 and 400 level courses. Deep fintech and insurtech nerds only need apply, right? So if you think about that, I think the thing that a lot of people, and again, insurtech, I understand, but there are so many similarities to fintech, which is I think where I'm going to draw my question to you from on this, which is, in the 300 and 400 level courses, you look to middle and back office. You look to understand the stack in which the ecosystem in the industry exists today, and figure out how is the digitization, how is the inability to physically gather and do things going to impact and hopefully revolutionize and force the changes that are necessary. So when you think about essentially a pretty kind of facade that it may just be smoke and mirrors on the customer's front, right now you've got on the fintech side, folks that are figuring out, I can't come into the office to cut the checks to our vendors because people are physically doing stuff like that, hence an avid exchange and a need for that kind of model. But in the insurtech front, I mean, I've seen views where there are stacks of brokers on top of underwriters, on top of all kinds of claims adjusters, and then models and models on all this stuff. And then surprisingly over here, no models, and it's kind of like a rudimentary thing. How is all that in this kind of advanced level course of this question? How is that going to change? How does it need to change, and what might COVID do to push that forward?
I think COVID's going to push it forward. Some of that, though, is going to take a little bit more time, too, because when you get to the more sophisticated side of all of this, when I think of your 300, maybe 400 level courses, maybe this is an advanced degree, is more around the machine learning and the artificial intelligence and the data, right? The data. And think about being able to use pictures to settle a claim and be accurate about the cost of replacement. So I think the next level, the more sophisticated point to what you're saying is over time, you'll see more sophistication in terms of the analytics involved in being able to predict and not just look back, but be able to predict. And I think, taking your payments as an example, the payments industry has done a really great job of actually connecting the ecosystem. Insurance doesn't have that. So when you think about it, maybe blockchain comes into play in the future, right? Because you're settling with counterparties and there's a way to authenticate and do a handshake. So I think that's where it will go next. I think COVID will help push kind of the 1, 2, 300 classes first. But I think over time, you're going to see more of that sophistication.
So we haven't talked about this at all ahead of time. And if this is a dumb question, you can go ahead and tell me. But I'm just curious, what's your take on where the focus of the industry is going to be? Because one might naturally think, and people like you and I think, as we've gotten to know each other, we exist and live in this space every single day. However, a lot of these companies are cruise liners. They're not speedboats, and they have to focus necessarily where the biggest fires are. And we're in a crisis and there are a lot of fires. Do you think the focus is going to go to these opportunities of innovation, or on the whole, is it going to be looking at all the claims that are coming in and the exposure that exists there, and maybe act inadvertently and having to look backwards rather than forwards at a pivotal moment like this?
It's a great question. And I can only surmise and kind of guess at what would happen. But I think what will happen is you have to settle those claims. You have to underwrite. I think that will continue. Those companies that have already started specific use cases, and if they could prove them out, will probably accelerate them. I think another slight issue you'll have to deal with too is the funding for all this, right? So I think CapEx will change as well. And CapEx will go to where you can really create value in terms of organizations. And so, I think it's a delicate balance, but I do believe, based upon what I hear from colleagues across many different industries and in the consulting space too, is this is going to put more pressure on insurers being able to scale their digital operations. And so it will be an impetus to get there.
Do you think, I'm just curious how similar it is to my experience in fintech on the insurtech side. Do you think that force pushing them towards addressing the digital thing, do you think they do it from a customer experience perspective, i.e., and I use that term derogatorily, derogatorily, you know what I'm saying?
You want to get your thesaurus out?
In a bad way, right? In a negatory way, where they simply smoke and mirrors putting paint on the outside of the house when the foundation needs to be fixed? Or do they do so in a comprehensive user experience way, which the customer is one, but then the middle, front, back office employees, workers, and functions are also part of that equation?
It has to be from a customer perspective. What I would describe it as customer, employee, agent, partner. From that experience, it has to be across the board. It's not about smoke and mirrors, because this environment has forced us to work from home. There was an announcement earlier in the week where, I believe it was Nationwide, announced that they're going to go fully working from home with the exception of 4 locations. Nationwide, no pun intended, right? So I think, to your point, if companies go down the path of just putting lipstick on the pig, they will miss an opportunity to create value, to create efficiency. And I think it kind of defeats the purpose of this being able to work in a virtual digital world.
But, and again, I'm just going to play devil's advocate because I am clearly in your side of this argument right now. I think, though, that there are these two competing forces. There's like a 5% force in these industries that are like, this is the opportunity. They're saying the things like you're saying and meaning them. And then there's another 5% that's kind of steering ships and doing it in other ways, which are saying, yeah, please say that to our customers, say that publicly so people think we're doing the right things. But when it comes time to making the decisions, the investments, figuring out where to actually put, their resources, time, they're like, lipstick that thing up and let's move on to the other thing, which is, revenue protection and margin expansion. I mean, how do you either balance that in your mind, or how do you make that change? I mean, you're a transformational officer. This is like what your task is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that get solved? How does somebody sitting in one of these companies, whether it's fintech or insurtech right now, that's maybe in the middle of that battle, fight that?
It's a great question. And, look, it's just a point of view. It's my point of view, and might not be shared with others. Could be the one having this point of view. Is I believe companies that short sight or short circuit those types of improvements or that type of investment, in the end, will not win the customers. They won't be profitable. They won't be able to grow. I really believe that this point in time is going to pivot and really force not just the lipstick on the pig, the customer piece, but dropping value to the bottom line. Yes, on the growth side, and yes, on the expense side. But I believe that the technology can help solve both. And if you don't try to balance that equation, I really believe you run the risk of becoming, non-existent.
So let's switch gears from the industry and where it is and how it can move. And let's talk a bit about the...
By the way, sorry for cutting you off. By the way, I was talking to my parents the other day, and they were doing a new insurance policy, life insurance policy. And my mother doesn't want anybody in the house because she's a germaphobe, right? So think about what I just said. If you can't figure out how to engage from an insurance agent's perspective, sitting across from people who don't want you in their homes or are afraid of virus or whatever, I think you run the risk of not delighting your customer base. But
that's good though. I like that a lot, because I was on the other side of that before this. It wasn't the germs. I didn't want to sit with the people. I didn't want to do that. I was like, hey, where's the app where I can do this? Because like one of my insurance agents is a longtime buddy of mine, so I don't mind, and he's kind of there. But like, aside from that, all in all, like the industry feels like H&R Block in the mall right now. We're all kind of suddenly becoming aware in the late 90s that this person's just asking me the questions and typing in the fields. Can I do that from home? Now, I'm not saying there isn't a higher end, more sophisticated version than just that, but I think the common person would be surprised how late 90s H&R Block Molly a lot of the insurtech industry is right now.
But you're absolutely right. It's behind the banking industry is way out in advance, right? You can kind of do almost anything online.
Yes. Compared to insurance, yes.
But they're more advanced than the insurers. I think property and casualty isn't too far behind, and then the life insurers obviously are further behind than that. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, I love that point. And in fact, that's the perfect transition. So I wanted to transition to our second major topic, which is how can verticals like insurtech aid in the resumption and recovery efforts for COVID? I had two buckets here, and I'm going to start with the second one because right there, you've hit on something, which is there are new problems that exist today that didn't exist 3 months ago, right? And those new problems, you can view those as like, all right, that's just going to hinder the industry, or they'll figure it out. Or insurtech could step forward, and you and I were talking about this over the last week. They could step forward and say, we're going to create a nimble new insurance product through insurtech scalability that says, oh, hey, brewery or restaurant or bar that has to bring people in and there's exposure. Right now, there's products out there to sanitize and understand the biofilm layers and what kind of potential germs there might be for spreading. So you could buy those capabilities and bring them in and sanitize, or you could bundle that with an insurtech product which says you are 100% covered from liability if you do the right controls. Like, is that not, that's a good example, but I bet you there's a billion things like that there could be innovating. The problem is they're at a small speedboat level. And how does that all occur?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we were talking about that. There are so many different opportunities out there. I can't name them all. The one that you and I were talking about, that's a really unique concept, because if you think about it, you've in essence changed the risk profile and you've changed the product set, right? You're just not offering a traditional small business insurance policy. You basically changed it. The other part that we were talking about that day too was around partnering with other solutions, whether it's a banking product or a payment product, so it's easy for small business to get back on their feet. They've got like that portal or that way of being able to see everything in one spot to get them what they need so they don't have to manage this very complex financial world.
So clearly that's a no-brainer. I think the devil's in the details as it relates to who's actually going to do it. I mean, we can all sit back and say, absolutely, that's a no-brainer. I'd use it. There'd be a market for it. It'd be lucrative for whoever did it. I think the big question is right now you've got big players, big global brands and logos that, again, and I don't say this as a slight, they got that size and they are driving a steamliner, right? You don't take a hard left or a hard right in a steamliner unless it's been designed in some incredibly special way where it's got tentacles out there, which I have seen very, very rarely in any industry. Or you're a small player who can innovate real quick, doesn't have scale. You're probably struggling for funding and financials and your own employees and things right now. And even if you aren't and you come up with the solution, you've got to figure out, okay, how is everyone going to know about it and now the few of them that make it to that point get snatched up and acquired. So like, I guess my question is, all these ideas are amazing. Who is best situated to do them and who needs a call to action?
Look, working in big organizations, and I really enjoy working in large organizations, but they move at a certain pace. And there's parts of organizations, that can actually move a little quicker. But I think the opportunity is ripe for the small scale startup capability, lower end of the marketplace to really start to create those opportunities. That said, as we know, working with a big organization can sometimes be kind of difficult, right? It could take time. There's not process, et cetera. But I have to believe that for companies to be successful, they're going to have to change their process and how they work with smaller vendors as well, right? So this idea of building everything, inside big organizations, I think will change over time to more of an ecosystem play. And that's where some of the smaller, more nimble, creative ideas can absolutely play into this, right? Because they've got the scalable infrastructure, the plug and play type of design.
Exactly. Completely agree. I do believe in the end, and this is, I didn't even plan this, this outcome or a rival stop from that line of questioning, but it's got to be the shared collaborative joint venture model that is half of a accelerator, half of a incubator of ideas, and half of a capital / platform for launching. So clearly that's a lot of the things we and others have been talking about. I think we just gave it a face and a name as it relates to InsurTech. So the final bucket is, what's your advice to InsurTech execs, to founders, to entrepreneurs that are navigating this crisis, and particularly not just at a high level of here's the Sun Tzu moment for you in the quote, but like the specifics. Who that person you mentioned who's in charge of the CapEx for the company and the deployment each year, they're faced with deciding, hey, I'm going to starve this and I'm going to put it here. Like, what's your mantra for them? What's your mantra for the person who, is deciding, am I going to pivot and be more of a speedboat in this way, or partner, or stay to myself and look backward or forward? What's some usable advice for the InsurTech executives and leaders and founders out there?
So it's a great question. And you're right. We didn't even talk about this. I was on a phone call earlier today with a very large insurer, with a person who is responsible for, call it the accelerator program. And we were talking about the different tranches of work they have in their organization, from the accelerator focus to more of a strategic venture and a partnership to all the way up to this acquisition. And I said, so how are you guys actually thinking about making all that work and plugging into the community where there's a lot of great ideas? And the response was, it's something that we absolutely have to focus on. So it's not so much even the CapEx allocation. It's how do we, because most firms have these startup type of organizations within their four walls. It's how do they take advantage of being more nimble and being quick? And I think that's the call out to them, is how do you change that internal process, if you will? I think the call out to the entrepreneurs is, it's a moment in time. right? Use the tailwind, be unconventional. There's opportunities to fix what happens today, but maybe there's opportunities where you and I were talking about before to be completely unconventional, right? And being unconventional might not yield real time benefits now, but boy, this opportunity I think is here for a while, and we should take advantage of it.
Well, those are some great words for us to leave on. And I'll tell you, I got to imagine, as difficult as all of this is, and no one would ever wish that we had to be in this position, but for people like yourself, as I've gotten to know you, who are transformational officers, who are the people who are tasked with forcing a lot of these boulders up these hills that seem to never end, there is an opportunity here. There's a silver lining where we're going to be forced to do a lot of those things that have been preached, but maybe haven't been palatable for decades now. Yeah. And if there's ever going to be a silver lining to such a brutal time period in our history, I think it's good points you've raised. That's it right now. Final word from you, Brian.
Be safe.
I think those are probably the mantra of every insurtech company.
We open at 5 o'clock today,
Oh,
partially open, 5 o'clock today. That's what I'm told.
Make sure your insurance is completely up to date, everyone. Brian, I'm going to call you Dr. Insurtech from this moment forward. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on episode 47 of the Fintech Moshpit. I think we've warranted a 48th after this. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time, folks.